So we were the first brand in India which actively went out and said we will not do a fairness cream. That's a lot of people told us at that time. So a lot of customers used to ask us, why don't you make a fairness cream? I said, we don't make a fairness cream because we don't believe you should artificially change your skin tone to something which it is not. Right? We believe in what's good should become better rather than trying to be somebody else.
Hi, welcome to Blinkit Pitstop. Today we are talking to Shankar. He's the founder and CEO of Plum Goodness, a skincare and beauty care company that's really growing fast on the Blinkit platform and in the country. Let's get into it. What was the life journey leading up to starting Plum?
So I started off in this industry in 97 in HUL. I joined them as a management trainee in technical function as it was called. So basically manufacturing and R&D. 4 years in manufacturing, 4 years in R&D. Then I left to do my MBA, and my batch happened to be a Krakow batch in ISB. We didn't know it at that time. In hindsight, so lots of unicorn founders from our batch. Ankur Varigos from our batch, for example. Right. So great batch at ISB, and from ISB went to McKinsey. I was there for a couple of years, and then I moved into private equity, not to move into private equity, but to actually work on building a business. So Everstone Capital at that time had a fairly new ops team working on smaller businesses. And it turned out that they wanted people who had a consumer plus consulting kind of experience to help those smaller businesses as an investor. And it also turned out, as luck would have it, that we were investors in Faces. And we were majority investors in Faces. So, I mean, we got a lot of the operational load onto us. And that's where I learned the front end of the business, because HUL was all about the back end. Faces, I learned about distribution. This was pre-online days. I'm talking about 2008, 9, 10. So online was just beginning to, you could see the seeds sort of there. But it was largely retail, largely general trade, and largely products of a 400 to 500 rupee price point, right? Not mass, not prestige. So I think that's where I really began to understand the masstige segment and the beauty segment and the consumer, the retailer of people who buy and sell 400, 500 rupee kind of product. And but in Faces, we are all about makeup and color. And skincare is something I always used to look from the outside, saying that's a great place to be, because there is a lot more loyalty. There's a lot more science you can talk about. There's a lot more impact you can have, because color is here and now. It's instant. Skincare is slightly more, it has a long tail of impact. So that's when I thought, when I was looking to move out of Everstone, because I really still wanted to work on the smaller things, and Everstone was becoming a bigger fund. And that's when I said, let me actually start out my skincare brand. This was in 2013. The word D2C was not born then. And I thought I'll start a retail brand. Then I realized that capital was not going to be that easy. And despite me coming from a background of working in a fund, or maybe because. So by accident discovered online in 2014. And I think in 2014, we became India's first online only beauty brand, skincare brand, when we sold from plumgoodness.com. So 9 years back. 14 July is what we celebrate as Plum's birthday.
Nice.
So that's the first time anybody placed an order for Plum on plumgoodness.com.
Nice. So, like, I think, how do you view like you were talking about the skincare segment in India? Like, why did you find it interesting? Yeah. India mein aisa kya hai for skincare, which is like an opportunity, or what is different from what is the global trend?
So if you rewind the clock a little bit, it all started with, mostly the market was almost like a dumbbell shaped market. You had a lot of brands in the mass segment, which was dominated by the MNCs and some of the local companies. And then you had a lot of brands in the prestige segment, which are almost always coming from abroad, with the exception back then of Forest Essentials and Kama Ayurveda, which were high-end brands born in India. Right? The middle was empty in two ways. There were no brands, or not enough brands, I would say, and there were no homegrown brands for sure. Right? You would have the somewhat mid-range brands coming in from the outside, but they were also a little out of reach. They're perhaps not connecting with the Indian consumer. So that's one big gap that I saw, which to this day, despite so many new brands coming in, to this day, that segment is a very exciting segment to be a part of, because there's a lot going on there. Today is not the same as tomorrow, even in that segment. That's number one. And the second gap was people getting a lot more conscious about what they consume, whether it is things like vegan beauty, and we were the first one to go vegan in beauty. As a concept, again, it didn't exist about 7 or 8 years back. Or to go harmful chemical free, people didn't care about 10 years back. Started, really, it's almost table stakes. Or to think of sustainability in packaging, or to say that I'm not going to discriminate basis skin shades, which was almost ruling the world of beauty a decade ago, right? So a lot of these consumer level changes started happening about a decade ago. Plus, I think it was a confluence of factors happening. Online beginning to pick up, content beginning to sort of shape people's thoughts and opinions and preferences way ahead of the purchase journey. So people are sort of occupying or present in the funnel several weeks before they make the purchase in beauty, right? And they're watching influencers, they're watching content on platforms, they're talking to each other, they're some other friends liked something, they're beginning to see that. So the entire impact of social and influencers on people's choices. So if you see all these three put together is what is really creating this sort of, the ingredients for what we are seeing today.
Do you think like customers are aware of like in something like skincare, right? Do you think they're aware what is good for them, or they're just like actually following here? Somebody like me is saying that this is good for me, and or is what they use, so I will use that.
So a lot of it is word of mouth driven. It used to be back then when it was physical sort of word of mouth. Then it was the dermats driving a lot of that. So at least the high-end preferences. But now what has happened is the role of content creators and the role of platforms in shaping preferences. Some of the larger beauty platforms actually excel in content creation, excel in concept creation around beauty, right? And influencers, I think, has been a sort of mini revolution of sorts in this country over the last, I would say, 8 or 9 years, not even before that. And the advent of easy video creation tools, easy image creation tools, as opposed to long text, where people used to be called bloggers. They're writing pages of text, which I think a very small proportion of society read. Today, you can get smart on an ingredient in 15 seconds when you watch a video, right? And then use the hashtag, go see whatever you want about the ingredient. So people are learning a lot online, almost all of it online, I would say. And that is then beginning to, then they go see reviews, and then they see, there's a lot of exchange of good old fashioned word of mouth. That then converts into a trial perhaps, and then a purchase. So it's a fairly, I would say, bouncy journey into the purchase occasion.
So, but like when Shashank from Whole Truth was here, right? He was basically talking about how, a lot of the marketing around what you eat is pure play marketing, right? How much of that is also true about skincare? Does it actually make a difference, right?
If I deliver,
right? Like, yeah.
So, truth be told, skincare is not going to suddenly transform you into something that you only dream about, right? At least topical skincare. If you go into more surgical or more sort of innovational skincare of injectables and all, that's a different category which we are not talking about. That's medicinal, that's derma. When we talk about actives, when we talk about even bioactives, take a simple example of green tea. Does green tea application on skin, not drinking, but application of green tea on skin do good for your skin? Absolutely yes. Is it going to transform you overnight? No skincare product or hair care product is going to, right? The way one should look at skincare is, it's like eating. You don't grow a 6-pack abs by just eating something overnight. You got to do a lot of other things around it. So skincare products, in our view, is part of a regimen of things that you need to do, including sleep well, reduce device time, etc., etc. And these are good supplements to have on your journey towards better skin, better hair. Again, what is better skin, better hair? Our view has always been it's about health rather than how you look alone. Right? If your skin is inherently healthy, and healthy means hydrated, having the right level of nutrients, protected from sun, right? Protected from oxidative damage that can happen due to factors like pollution. So if you basically need to take care of what is exposed to the elements outside, right? Starting with cleansing, starting with maintaining its pH, starting with keeping it hydrated or protecting it from the sun. So there's a lot that goes into just maintaining this. Now, you do it the right way, you get good results. You of course won't get transformative results overnight, as but it's always good to sort of look at what clinical studies are also telling us in terms of these ingredients, and clear evidence is there in terms of things becoming better over a period of time and helping maintain what's good. It's not going to magically transform, that is a fact, and neither do we. Most brands today don't call that magical transformation out, because we have to be truthful to the customer.
So like you called out two things, right? One is sort of looking at skin is an organ, and like basically the fitness of that organ, right?
Take care of it.
What you take care of it, right? But when you look at sort of your health around food and everything, a lot of the movement has been to sort of go back to the evolutionary time scale and say that our bodies are not really used to eating processed foods, our bodies are not used to eating XYZ things, so like we should kind of follow where we are on the evolutionary cycle, which is still like way further back, that you should eat more just
whole
naturally,
grain,
whatever it is that our hunter-gatherer ancestors were eating, and if you apply a similar rubric to something like skincare, right? Would you then why do we end up talking about like preserving ourselves from the sun or from the elements, right? Then we should have some version of that, keto or whatever that diet is called, like paleo diet, right? Which should be for skincare, that you don't do anything, right? You eat how the ancestors ate, and you treat your skin like they treated, which is without soap or without. And like why does that not exist?
Great question. And if you see Indian sort of Ayurvedic, or what is now very loosely called herbal beauty, it starts to sound like what you just said. You use natural products to sort of take care, etc. Now the thing is, sorry, I'm getting a little technical here, but
of course,
let's start with something as basic as cleansing. So cleansing starts with being able to remove what is not necessary on the skin. What is naturally available, there are a few natural surfactants available, few and far between, but they will come nowhere close to the kind of cleansing efficacy that we are talking about. Okay. Now, of course, you can go too far and have very drying cleansers on skin, which strips out even what is necessary when you are cleansing. And I am talking the most basic of things, which is cleansing, right? When you formulate in a way that you are able to balance out effective cleansing with preserving what is necessary, then you have a good cleanser. And then you have, okay, that's one basic part. Now let's come to moisturizing. Right? Our skin does lose moisture, we do have chapped lips and so on and so forth. And if you sort of go back in olden ages, it used to be animal fat or oil or something they used to apply. Now that doesn't stay too long. It's going to sort of get absorbed, or or it's probably going to be too sticky for us to sort of move around with oiled arms, for example, in a place like this. So you need stuff which is more, I would say, socially acceptable, personally more delightful to use, which nature doesn't always solve for. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So that's where I think the role of science comes, is to make things better without affecting what's necessary or essential within skincare. I just gave two very basic examples. Even something like sun, right? Again, it's a little bit like preventive healthcare, right? Our forefathers may not have done a lot of preventive healthcare that we do today, because they probably weren't aware. Longer lives, better, more youthful looking people, even sort of later into their lives, was perhaps not the case maybe even a century ago. They just weren't aware. of the effects of what sun can do to you. Talking about sunscreen specifically, right? So I think what science has done over the last few decades is thrown a lot of light on what can be done effectively and safely. Of course, the state of the art on safety keeps moving forward. So it's interesting to sort of see how the science makes things better. And simply being a paleo equivalent in skincare is not going to be as delightful as what you see in terms of the fragrances and the finishes, and B, was still not as effective also, which is the, I think, sort of fundamental difference between what happens in food versus what happens in skincare.
Interesting.
But it's a very interesting sort of direction to explore. And there are several brands which try to be quote unquote 100% natural, chemical free. There's nothing called chemical free. You can be 100% natural or plant derived or whatnot. But when you get into the sensory or the efficacy of those products, you begin to see typically that beyond a few basic products, it begins to not matter. I mean, not make sense actually.
Interesting. So like so there is the science part of it, which is, let's say, modifying how we are naturally like, and like trying to make it so that it is more socially acceptable, right? Like you said. And you touched the second part of this, which was gear. 10 years ago, it was about the shade of the skin,
Right.
was a very big sort of center point to all of the conversation around beauty. And now it is a lot more technical about like what
works,
ingredients and what works and what doesn't work. Sort of, if you sort of bring it all together, right? Like, is science just trying to sort of make it so that there is an ideal that we are still trying to achieve in terms of like what our skincare or whatever our skin is like? Maybe the conversation moved away from color or shade of your skin.
Yeah.
But is it still like, is science still trying to get us somewhere which everybody has that ideal, and it still might be anchored on shade, or it still might be anchored on the certain way a skin looks?
Right. So thankfully, we moved, at least the urban narratives have largely moved away from shade of skin. And to our credit, we somewhere saw it 10 years back. So we were the first brand in India which actively went out and said, we will not do a fairness cream. Right? A lot of people told us at that time. So a lot of customers used to ask us, why don't you make a fairness cream? I said, we don't make a fairness cream because we don't believe you should artificially change your skin tone to something which it is not. Right? We believe in what's good should become better rather than trying to be somebody else. Right? Now, there is inherent conflict that you nicely brought out in what we're trying to do in skincare. Are we chasing an ideal? Sometimes yes. For example, a lot of brands talk about blemish-free skin or acne-free skin, or for acne-prone skin. Now, is acne necessarily bad? It probably is cosmetically bad. It also is a sign that your skin is stressed internally. Now, where do you draw a line between what is sort of skin not at its optimum versus what is simply being fixed for a cosmetic purpose? That line is not very sharp or clear. Also, what's happening is, which is a very interesting trend that we've seen, is people are today wanting to be at the cutting edge of what they're using on skin in terms of not just the benefits they seek, but also 2 levels deeper in terms of the ingredients that they use and don't use. Right? There's a lot of conversations happening around, I use this ingredient, I make sure this ingredient is not there in this. It's not as if some TV commercial came and told me that this is going to solve my XYZ problem, I just go blindly by it. That was the case a decade ago. I think today people are having a lot more informed conversations around, I want this with this but not this. So, for example, we have a green tea toner, which is one of our best-selling products. There is a fragrance-free version of it. There is a with fragrance version of it. Because people told us, I like your green tea toner, but I don't like fragrance on my skin.
Got it.
So give me a green tea toner without fragrance. There was a time when I was toying with this idea. Maybe I should go back to toying because COVID didn't let us complete that project. Of how much green tea do you want in your toner? Do you want 1%, 2%, 0.5%? How do you like your toner? Should be more astringent, less astringent? Are we able to then almost, at least from a fixed menu, if not an infinite menu, customize and give it to you when you want something with 0.5% today or 2% tomorrow, and deliver it within 2 days to you?
Or 10 minutes.
Well, the manufacturing 2 days, and the delivery, of course. So I think we were really toying with that. Can we go down that path of actually? And several startups also tried customizing almost infinitely for people basis your skin type or hair type. That unfortunately didn't take off in India, but I think a limited customization menu could still, is what I believe.
And this I've heard from being in business and sort of in the personal care space and the beauty space, that people are actually fundamentally more conscious about what they put on their face than what they put in their body.
Right.
Do you think that is true?
True, very true. I think hair starts first. People are extremely conscious about, and also a lot of social, let's say, currency is derived from hair, then face, and then skin. I mean, body is how it generally rolls for people, and therefore the propensity to learn more about what's in, what's out is very high for skin, face, and hair. A lot more than for body. Body is a lot more about sensory, which is fragrance, and how it smells and how it feels, largely, right? And how it looks in the jar as a third factor. But it's body is a lot about how it feels and how it smells. You're not necessarily looking for, let's say, curative solutions, but that is also changing slowly now. There are a lot of lactic acid body washes in the market. We have a deo roll-on that has lactic acid and glycolic acid, right? At the end of the day, beauty is not just about what you think of yourself, but what you think others think of you.
Right? Most things.
and in that sense, it's also a little bit like fashion.
Yeah.
Because you don't wear clothes, you do wear to feel better. I think a lot of what you feel about it is also dependent on what you think others are feeling about it.
So you're creating an image for yourself,
right,
which you think this is how people see me.
How people see me. Yeah. And something like fragrances, for example, defines it really, really well. People almost choose fragrance basis their personality and what others should think of them.
I think most of the time fragrance for me is how do I finish this bottle of fragrance
or not smell bad.
Mostly it is you use it so that you're not offensive smelling at any point of time.
Right.
Which again, something you said about skincare also, I don't think it is just a fragrance, right? Your lifestyle, what you eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you are active and keeping your sweat pores active, I think that has a much bigger impact on what you will smell like at the end of the day versus just saying that, okay, this is the fragrance which I will use. But so now let's talk about Plum, right? And your brand. So I'm assuming that you are building the brand on the principles that we're talking about, or on the sort of philosophical lines of we should not be putting harmful stuff and whatever we know is good.
Right.
Obviously the products are vegan, all of that stuff. So how, as a brand, do you communicate these principles to the customer?
Right. So one interesting thing happened when we were starting out, that we strapped on the line "Be Good" to Plum. The logo, actually, the original logo has Plum, Be Good written on top. And that Be Good has almost driven a lot of our thought process in terms of the brand itself. So much so that when we were looking for a domain name, obviously plum.com was not available, or Plum on Instagram or Facebook was not available. So Plum Goodness became the de facto handle, right? And right from the beginning. And somehow that name just stuck. The two names stuck together for us nicely. And people then almost, since your name is Plum Goodness, they expect you to do what is good and stay away from what is bad. And they also good. I like good as a word. It's a very simple word. The good thing about good is that most people typically don't need a textbook definition of what is good. It's instinctive to you, from childhood we know what is good and what is evil. Evil is to be avoided, good is to be taken forth, and it has a lot of dimensions. It's not just the absence of certain things, it's also the positive presence of certain things that make something good, right? So for us, good as a concept is what has been the central pillar of what Plum is about. And when we, about a year back, did a slightly deeper consumer study on what people expect from a brand, the phrase that sort of almost popped out was goodness that delivers, right? So, saying things we can deliver on and delivering things that we say we can do, right? That this is a brand that is truthful about what it says and is essentially thinking and doing good. So, be good is not just about think good or do good; it's about generally being good, everything. So, that whole concept is what really has shaped Plum's thought process, even internally. I mean, it's not just customer facing, even internally in our organization, the kind of ways of working, the values that we follow. Despite all the pressures of running a sort of high growth business in a capitalistic world, we try to sort of ensure that the goodness quotient is maintained in whatever we do. Again, not to say that we are perfect or we do everything right, but at least the intent of the brand is something that we've been very steadfastly building, that this brand thinks and does good, and if it does bad, it'll own up and say, hang on, we'll make this better. Right? So that's really what has driven Plum's
So you're saying it's not really the messaging, it's the actual act of being good.
Yes.
And that is how you're building the brand.
Yeah. So the another sort of aspect of that came out in the consumer study. It was, people said Plum is about real goodness. Even I went back and contested it, saying what is real goodness and fake goodness, right? But people said you can talk about being good, but I think genuinely demonstrating that you're being good and sort of standing up for it, no matter what. I think that is what real goodness is about, is what consumers told us as how they see the brand, which was very powerful for us, because that meant that we didn't have to change anything, in fact.
What do you think drove that in the consumer's thought process, or what do you think drove that perception? There is one which is that you were actually trying to do it for the most part. You were trying to do the right things, right? But was there something you did or didn't do which you think built that perception?
I think it's been built over a period of time in terms of what we did and didn't do. So what we did was, I think, trying to be genuine about what we are putting out, and the sort of other side of that coin is we were never making outlandish claims that 2 weeks and problem sorted or 4 weeks problem sorted. Number one. Number two, we put a lot of heart and mind, but more heart into our product, which still shows. I think if you go around and ask people, what do you think is Plum's biggest strength? Even competition acknowledges that it's the product, right? And that is that's not an accident. Neither is it trivial to achieve, in all humility, because it takes a lot of TLC to get the product out. I always say that it's easy to get a product to 90% okay, somewhat easy, somewhat difficult to get it to 95, more difficult to 99. To get it to 99.5 and beyond, the curve is really steep from there, right? So we try to, I'm not saying we do all the time, we try to get our product beyond 99 most of the time. If it's a 95, we ourselves pull it back and make it a 99 and put it back into the market. That consistency of approach, I think, is fundamentally why people believe that. Of course, there are gaps in what we do, and that's another thing about us, that we are sometimes our biggest critics ourselves as brands, and as me as a person also, I sometimes do tell people that I am my biggest critic, so don't worry about telling me things I am not doing okay, right? I think that therefore the honesty in accepting that we are not doing certain things well, and that authenticity of saying I am not pretending to be somebody I am not, but here is who I am, this is what I do well, this is what I don't know how to do, this is what I did bad, and I'm sort of circling back and making it better. I think that sort of conversations over a period of time, through social, through platforms, through influencers, sometimes direct. A lot of customers write to me directly, right? And I respond to them directly as me. Like we just had a big birthday sale, and we sort of had a lot of backlogs on orders because there's some sort of error in planning or miss in planning. And people were waiting for, forget 10 minutes, they were waiting for 6 days. 6 days for the order to be dispatched, right? A lot of people said, I've had to go through a terrible time after ordering. I said, that's not acceptable. So I apologize that we didn't plan properly. I'm not going out saying that, I got 3x orders that I thought I would, and I should have planned for it, right? So, and people today are, I think, thankfully accommodative of, and in fact appreciative more than accommodative of brands which own up and which are authentic, which are truthful. And that's again a change I've seen happen over the last decade or so. Otherwise, the brand and the audience was sort of separated by a few levels. They were sort of yelling from the top, and something was being caught. Today, you're at the same plane. You're conversing with each other. You can't run away.
So you have a certain value system as a brand, and you believe in these things, and that's yours, and maybe that's the entire company. And you want to communicate to the customer, and you're saying the customers get it, that they are themselves talking about real goodness, and that is because of the acts of goodness that you do. Does that make marketing redundant?
Not at all.
So what is the role of marketing over there in maintaining that authenticity?
For us, it has always been a lot of touch points as opposed to one touch point that we talk about. So things like Empties for Good, which is an initiative that we run, that's again fairly well known, at least among the loyal crowd of Plumsters that are there, where we collect our empties back free of cost and give them shopping. That was the first time online anybody did that. So that we invested a lot of time, effort, money telling people about Empties for Good. Project Blackboard, something that's currently running, which is about educating the girl child, or 1% for the planet that we were part of, where we were giving out 1% of our revenue towards environmental causes ever since we started. I think these are all things where it's not just about doing something, it's also about creating that sort of a hook in the consumer's mind, saying, okay, this is a brand that gives 1% out, or this is a brand that takes the empties back, or this is a brand that gives away a part of its profits for girl child education. So I think identifying things that make us stand out in the market and being the first to do some of those, and then talking about those, has gone a long way in establishing. But again, I would somewhere revert to I think doing it and ensuring that we talk enough about the doing through whatever channel that is, rather than talk about it. Right? I think that's really what has worked for us.
So how much of, for example, the generating awareness about Plum actually focuses on the product versus the goodness of what you do?
So this is a perpetual conflict between the business guys and the marketing guys. The business guy says, you guys given me a target, so better talk about the product. The marketing guys is like, beyond a point, everybody's advertising, let's say, a niacinamide moisturizer on your platform. So how does the customer choose between A and B? And that's basis that ultimately is going to be basis what brand they have an affinity towards, and that comes through. So this is the perpetual debate that is there. Because we are in a highly brand, I won't say saturated, but brand heavy place called beauty. Lots of brands vying for attention. We can't escape the product communication, and therefore, in terms of percentage, the vast majority goes towards product advertising.
Right.
Although, if you ask the sort of creator of brand in me, I think it should almost be the other way around.
Yeah.
Right. And product almost becomes, most of the iconic brands that we know, the product is almost incidental to the brand.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact, some brands have transcended categories all the way from a car to a fragrance. You take the Jaguars and the Mercedes of the world, right?
Yeah.
So they just transcend product. To me, Plum, with this concept of what we are, can actually transcend product. But then we all run businesses, we know how it works, right? So you struggle to find that balance all the time.
I mean, from what you've told me, right? Like if you truly believe that the goodness is what the customers are getting, and that is the biggest feedback loop. To my mind, almost like any time that you don't talk about that
is an opportunity lost, perhaps.
Yeah, that almost it takes away from the authenticity and the message of the product. That's what I would feel, that almost not advertising your product would be like goodness, that almost saying that we're not advertising our product, we'll advertise the goodness that we do, we will invest behind that.
But then you have it's a
very tough one.
It's a very tough one, and then you have the share of voice metrics and all those things.
All of that doesn't matter, because you should be measuring yourself on goodness, not on share of voice then, right?
Yeah. But having said that, and here is where the contradiction plot thickens almost. Yes. India is still a very what's in it for me market. Right? Across categories. It has changed slightly, but it has not changed to the point where people are okay to ignore benefit or value for money or those harder parameters and choose softer goals, which is beginning to happen a little bit in Europe, not entirely, but beginning to happen. In India, I think that is a very, very small portion. So the reality of our market is it's a very what's in it for me. You take makeup, which is our newest category, right? We would ideally love to talk care in makeup, even though we are talking product. We'd love to, and we do talk care in makeup. But the thing that people want in makeup is how pigmented is it, how long is it going to stay. Those account for like 75-80% of the choice weight. And then like does it care, etc., etc. So it's very here and now, what's in it for me. Changing for sure, but not at the pace that one would like. Again, it's not an excuse for not doing that stuff, but
no, it's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
And if I were to ask you, like, what percentage of your business would you sacrifice to not have to live in this reality, but to create that different reality in which you talk about goodness, and that's all you do, and that's what your brand is, right? Like, how much of your business would you sacrifice to like create that and be that be the mission of the company?
Yeah, easily about 30-40% off my head. I never thought about it this way. Yeah. I should probably think on my way back from here, but 30-40% can be done without sort of betting the farm, as they say. But I think that over the long term will definitely solve. The good part is why I'm saying 30-40%. I'm not sort of being boastful here, but I think we have established a certain equity,
right,
over the last 9 years of the brand's existence. So therefore, we don't have to at some level try too hard to say basic things. And I think when we start talking stuff that transcends immediacy of the product, I think it's great food for thought. I mean.
So there's a book which I read, it's called "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway." Right. A lot of these decisions, at least what we have experienced, and they don't evenly apply. I almost feel that the way that we think of, like you said, 30-40%, you'll lose 30-40% of your business. I think if you do it, you'll probably lose maybe 10% or 20%. Like, I think our doomsday scenarios are much worse, right? And at the same time, I think as human beings, our optimistic scenarios are much higher, right, than reality. Because for a lot of these things, I think our instinct is curbed by knowledge, not the other way around, right? Like it's not like we know that this is the right thing to do and then instinctively we are pulling back away from it. It's like instinctively this is the right thing to do, but our knowledge, the reality, what we've been taught, what the MBAs say, they actually take us like into a much worse doomsday scenario than what actually reality exists.
Yeah, and I think I would go so far as to say almost to a suboptimal outcome sometimes, because you are solving for. At the end of the day, consumers are living, breathing, emotional human beings, and as a brand, if I'm able to talk to them in that, or relate, and they're able to relate to me in that frame of mind, that's a far more happy coexistence of consumer and brand than a very transactional, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't think you ever win in the what's in it for me customer. Right.
Yeah.
I think till, and our journey also, we went through that, like, the transactional customers, the ones
Right.
that are
Deal seekers,
that you have, that's a reality of life that we live with. Till the time we said no, right? We need to be appreciated for what we do for the lives of our customers, right? And if they don't appreciate it, then it means we're not doing a good enough job. Like, that's the signal, right? That if we are not appreciated, then they don't think that we are adding that much value, which was one of the biggest levers from us moving back from like next day delivery to 45 minutes to 30 minutes to 10 minutes. Right.
That at 7 outside.
Yes. Yeah. Over here now we're delivering in 7 minutes.
That's awesome.
So that's the next thing which we are trying is how much of the cities that we do can we cover in like 7 minutes, because you actually see the curve of customers love and like what it does for their lives just go out dramatically at like 6 or 7 minutes, because it's literally you're part of the same activity.
True.
I'm making coffee and you will deliver it to me, right? By the time the kettle heats up. And that's like an incredibly different way to manage your life. Right. And
this has actually happened to me. I'm South Indian I'm a practicing South Indian, I call it that. And curd rice is a part of. Therefore, curd rice is a part of. So I used to tell my family that when I start having my first course of rice and order curd, it'll arrive before I reach my curd rice. It actually used to do. It actually does.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's actually true what you said.
Yeah. And I think this is something which we hear from customers all the time. But I think that just sort of going back to the part where customers, if they don't appreciate you for what you do, right, then it's a losing battle, right? Like, and those are, I know that it's very hard to give up market share, and I have done that, but I think
tough. Yeah, it's a very tough choice. But I think it's interesting to think about the worst case scenario and really be a little bolder about it. Sometimes I do think so.
And I think we put it on a 30-year timeline, it becomes easier.
Yeah, true.
Right.
True.
Then
it's very simple actually.
Yeah.
The answer is just obvious.
Yeah. But I think most of it is our emotions and, where we are in life and like how we actually process that thought process, right? Because it's not as simple either, right? Then you have to be at a point where you truly, really believe that, I'm going to die on this hill. Like, let's see. Which I think is a lot more fun than like.
Yeah. Also, I think that's what creates breakthrough stuff.
Yeah. You have to be willing to die on that hill, right? Yeah. But it's very interesting. Like the last few of these that we've done, they've all been with founders that are building companies which are very close to like people's identities, right? Like which play a part in creating people's identities, right? Like this is how I look, this is who I am, right? Like this is all of that. And I think everything else is a lot more about emotional and mental health of people, right? You are the only person who's talking about like, dude, we are good people, we'll do good things, and we will do goodness for the planet, we will do it for society,
people who are less fortunate,
right? So we will do all of these things, and that's why you should have a relationship with our brand,
right?
Whereas you are also very critical to the identity and how people look, but you're the only brand which is not talking about that. You're actually saying, no, I talk about everything else, right?
True.
And I think that's great.
And for us also, maybe because I come from a product background, or that the product should delight at the point of use has always been even if you are making the most boring, active driven skin serum, we see how do we make it delightful. sensorily. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun actually. And we can't think of it any other way. We get bored otherwise.
Yeah, which I think is in your business is just the baseline. Like the product has to delight, right?
Yeah.
I think that's not the baseline for the brand though.
Correct.
Right. I think
Absolutely.
if your brand was talking about how delightful our serum is, I don't think you will be able to differentiate.
Half as interesting or half as interesting.
Yeah. And like make half as much of a difference, I believe. But cool. How do you actually go about selecting the kind of people that you want on the journey with you?
So almost a third, if not 40% of my time goes in people choices. And even though we are now about HO level 200 people strong and overall 300 people strong, but I've gone back to when anybody who gets in, I meet before they join the organization. I had for a while not done that, but then I realized that it's good to have people. And I always tell people one thing when I meet them. I typically don't interview people. I just like to have a conversation with them. To me, what's important is everybody's on a journey, right? And that journey is as many journeys as there are people. And it changes over a period of time for people. All of us have the journey of 10 years ago is very different from the journey that we look forward to now. To me, and similarly, the company is on a journey. And it's very different from what it was even 5 years back or 2 years back. To me, it's important for that person also to realize and us to realize or to evaluate whether their journey and our journey are sort of overlapping or it's sort of limited, intersections.
Or just coexisting because of certain constraints.
Exigencies or constraints. So a lot of my time is actually spent in ascertaining. According to me, that's baseline again, because if that doesn't happen, he or she is going to find something else to do very quickly. And that's a bad outcome for the person and for the organization, because their CV is going to look like six months of stints. And for us, it's like retraining the whole thing again. So to me, that one bit is about that hygiene of, are we seeing an overlap of the journey of where you are going and where we are going, no matter how junior a role it is or how senior a role it is. The second thing...
But how do you ascertain that?
So I once had a semi-analytical way of doing it, which is to draw a spider diagram. I used to put money, position, appreciation, learning, and 5 or 6 parameters. And I said, what do you seek now in your... So early in the career, a lot of people are seeking money because they have loans to pay or whatever. So they really draw a diagram of, they mark on the diagram saying, this is what I seek in my life. And I've seen people to get very reflective and also always truthful in terms of how they declare it.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have the stated preference versus real preference.
No, I've actually had people saying, if they drew it on a whiteboard, they say, can I take a photograph back? Because I need to go back and think about this. It is very reflective for them.
Right.
And then I used to, with another color pen, say, this is what the role offers. This is where we are offering. Money, you probably seek this, but I'm going to be here.
Right.
Satisfaction, you're okay with this, but I'm offering this. Right? If the webs are broadly overlapping, then it's okay, good news. If it is not, I will tell you it is not. You come in fully knowing that it is not matching with what you seek. And you make peace with it before you walk in. Right? So I found that a very interesting construct to...
How many people drew circles?
In fact, I was surprised 95% plus people were very truthful, at least not, sort of party line, responses weren't there. 95% of people, I could actually see them thinking and saying, wait, hang on, this. They used to give reasons as to why. In fact, a couple of them added 2 or 3 parameters to that, to the circle, saying, I think you should also ask me about these 2. And those are really fun sort of interviews to have with people. I think that really helped us, at least, and help the prospective sort of, team members understand what it is they are walking into. And I always like to make it sound worse than what it actually is to work with us, so that people don't get a negative surprise when they walk in.
But why would you do that?
Because it is tough, right? While what we are trying to do is a lot of fun.
Right.
The industry that we operate in, the sort of circumstances under which we operate, the supply chains are sort of controlled. Certain parts of the supply chain, for example, are still very tightly controlled by few vendors. And so you need people to come in saying I'm going to have a very challenging time here. It's not definitely not going to be an easy ride, but I learn a lot in that process. So I think that feeling, if they walk in with and sort of, even if they don't have it innately before they walk in for the interview, but when they walk out thinking, hang on, this place is about me learning, falling and getting up and again learning, and it allows me to do that. I think that when that match happens, again, it's difficult to ascertain that match a priori till the person starts off. And I keep joking in my team that if I really have to call myself a good selector of people, then my success rate should be more than 50%. Otherwise, you might as well decide by a coin toss.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of coming to me, you decide by, I don't tell you, probably won't do a better job. So at least 6 out of 10 people I hire should be good. Otherwise, I'm not doing a good job. So I keep evaluating myself on whether I have done that well. I think one thing really helped crystallize at least some of the thought processes around how we evaluate fit in a manner of speaking. And that was definition of ways of working for us. So we defined 8 ways of working for the organization, starting with customer view is the only view, go beyond, think like an owner, learn with humility, lead with respect. So 8 such things that care for those who are less fortunate. And we sort of nicely put them into words which are easy to understand. And we are able to ask people, give me an example of where you went beyond a silo or a layer. Give me an example where you learned with humility, where you made a mistake and you learned. I think those are helping us take better decisions. But truth be told, we're very far from being perfect. I think a lot of organizations struggle with that.
Right.
It's probably the number one thing to solve for also as you scale.
I think like you made the point around, think like an owner, right? And this is a question that somebody asked me a few days ago, right? Like, how do you make people in your team feel like owners, right? And I think about a lot of the time what usually organizations, and even we got wrong for a very long period of time and still do, is you can't make people feel like owners until they are actually owning something, right? And you kind of don't buy into ownership. You have to be given ownership, right?
Interesting.
And we never do that. Organizations never do that. So while we create this value system,
right,
where we want people to operate with humility and to act like owners, I think the balance of power rests more with the executives who are not comfortable giving ownership, right? And rather retaining control and then expect that people will still act with ownership. No, they will not.
That's the contradiction. Yeah.
Right. So the act of like making sort of people, it's somewhere like, I think those values end up being far away from the system designs that you put into place, right? That if you put a system design in place, which is still like extremely like decision making is at the top, and like, people within the company, they don't actually have ownership or freedom to take decisions, right? And then you say, no, act like owners. People will be like, on what? Right? And we clearly see that between leaders within the organization, those who actually pass on a lot of like ownership and responsibility and let people fail as well. Right. And that they create, much better ownership structures than the ones that are saying that, no, you should have ownership, right? Like
how you enable that also is a...
Yeah. See, I think there's a huge difference between somebody talking to somebody for an interview for, let's say, a couple of hours and like doing it maybe 2 or 3 times to get them on board. Because like you said, that spider curve of like what people are optimizing for and what it does for them, it might not be that, that they are the right fit.
Correct.
But people optimize. We often tend to take decisions on one singular factor which really stands out at that point in time, rather than being able to like write a polynomial equation around it, right?
True.
And I feel that then there are the folks who will survive in that and the folks will not survive in that. And that hit rate is not a selection hit rate. It is just what is the system that you created, that does it accept and allow like multiple kinds of personalities and diversity to like actually flourish in your system, which increases your hit rate.
Yeah.
versus it is built for only one kind of person to
One kind of-
survive.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the day, the architecture of that becomes like over time, I think the architecture of that like trumps
Absolutely.
everything else that we do as an
Absolutely.
organization.
Couldn't agree more.